Alright, welcome back. Let's do section 3.6, chapters 25 and 26. Alright, plot summary. Pip describes to the reader, Pip describes his peers at Mr. Pocket's office. Drummle is an unintelligent, lazy snob who suspiciously isolates himself. Startop is spoiled by his overprotective mother, to whom he is devoted. Pip prefers Startop's company to Drummle's. Herbert has become Pip's best friend and companion. They enjoy long walks on which they talk. Pip has done well in his studies, but spends money excessively. That happens a lot if you give somebody a lot of money real quick, and then they don't learn how to spend it wisely. They spend it excessively. Pip visits Wemmick's home for dinner, where he finds Wemmick to be warm and jolly, which is different from uh, his work demeanor. At work, he's like very stiff and formal and um, professional, and then at home, he's warm and jolly. While walking, Wemmick tells Pip more about Jaggers. Jaggers never locks his doors, but the criminals are afraid enough that they never rob him. Wemmick's home is small, but castle-like, with a drawbridge and a fortress with a cannon. Though it has Gothic features, it was built in the Victorian era. Wemmick is proud of having built it himself. He introduces Pip to his father, whom he calls Aged Parent, a senior man who is hard of hearing, but kind. Wemmick attends to him tenderly. Jaggers knows nothing of Wemmick's life outside the office. Wemmick maintains two distinct personalities, cold and businesslike at the office, and domestic and caring at home. So, literary devices. In this chapter, Dickens fills Pip's voice with similes to describe Bentley Drummle. First, Pip characterizes Drummle as one who was so sulky a fellow that he even took up a book as if its writer had done him an injury. A bit later, Pip would describe how Bentley came upon his boat in the wake alone under the overhanging banks and among the rushes. He would always creep inshore like some uncomfortable amphibious creature. So he even pilots his little boat suspiciously. It looks like he's being sneaky. Dickens also enjoys alliteration, or the same consonant sound used in quick succession. This lends a playful tone to his writing. Pip plays with the letters R and L while introducing Georgiana. She was a cousin, an indigestive single woman, who called her rigidity religion and her liver love. To add to this playfulness, Pip plays with the P sound when describing Wemmick's castle, namely, that it had taken him a good many years to bring the property up to its present pitch of perfection. That p is what they're referring to. As if this weren't enough Dickensian lightheartedness, Wemmick describes himself using polysyndecton. Ooh, write that one down. It's all italicized and everything. Polysyndecton, or a repetition of conjunctions. I am my own engineer, and my own carpenter, and my own plumber, and my own gardener, and my own jack of all trades. It's that repetition of and. It could also be called polysyndecton if he had said but. In this sentence, Dickens uses the connecting ands for effect, certainly more frequently than is necessary, but repeating the word several times in close succession adds strength to the individual qualities. So things are looking up. Things are looking okay in this chapter because, like the playful writing style, and Pip is making friends, uh, especially with the guy he once fought. Uh, is it Herbert, right? Herbert has become Pip's best friend. Okay, chapter 26. Pip and his peers visit Mr. Jagger's office, where they see him washing his hands and face after court. The three young men visit his grand but dingy house for dinner. This house contrasts with Wemmick's, revealing that while Wemmick has two separate lives, Jaggers is the same at work and at home. Inside is a stone hall and a dark brown staircase leading up to several rooms. One of these rooms is the dining room, where the table is nicely set. Oh, the dining room is upstairs? That's a little weird. The housekeeper, Molly, the one Wemmick warned of, whose face looks like it was disturbed by fiery air. What does that mean? She looks burnt? Serves dinner, dreading Jagger's disapproval. Jaggers encourages the guests to talk about themselves, coercing them as he wrenched the weakest parts of our dispositions out of us, always calculating and keenly perceptive in reading people. He takes a special interest in Drummle, although he warns Pip to stay clear of him. Jaggers forces the housekeeper to show the guests her strong wrists, even though she begs not to. Her wrists are scarred across, and Jaggers treats her cruelly. Her wrists are probably scarred from being in, like, handcuffs. He probably took one of his criminal people that, either that or she's a former slave. It's possible. Pip and Drummle argue about money and rowing, and after they leave, Pip goes back to apologize to Jaggers for the disruption. Jaggers notes that there's no need to apologize, and that he particularly likes Drummle, whom he refers to as the Spider. This nickname is symbolic of Drummle's venomous spirit. Okay, literary devices in this chapter. Besides the symbolism used for Drummle, Dickens uses extended symbolism as Pip describes Jaggers washing his hands. Okay, this is a pretty long one. I embraced this opportunity of remarking that he washed his clients off as if he were a surgeon or a dentist. He had a closet in his room, fitted up for the purpose, which smelt of the scented soap like a perfumer's shop. It had an unusually large jack towel on a roller inside the door, and he would wash his hands, and wipe them, and dry them all over his towel whenever he came in from a police court or dismissed a client from his room. So there's a phrase, I wash my hands of you, and it basically means like, I forget about you, I don't have any responsibility for you anymore. And that's what Jaggers does at the end of his day, is he washes his hands of his clients, forgets about them completely. So we see this act of Jaggers not simply cleaning his hands, but cleaning himself of his clients. Pip continues this symbolism when he drives home the fact later that he seemed to have been engaged on a case of darker complexion than usual, for we found him with his head butted into his closet, not only washing his hands, but laving his face and gargling his throat. Even when he had done all that, and had gone all around the jack towel, he took out his penknife and scraped the case out of his nails before he put his coat on. The section can be interpreted as Jaggers washing away the unpleasantness of his work or his clients. It's symbolic of Pontius Pilate from the Bible, washing his hands after sentencing Jesus to death, a way of washing away guilt. In this chapter, Dickens again pulls out the literary device of an allusion. As you learned earlier in this course, this is when the author describes another work of art to convey a deeper symbolism. Dickens does this when he compares Jaggers' housekeeper to one of the witches in Shakespeare's Macbeth. I cannot say whether any diseased affection of the heart caused her lips to be parted as if she were panting, and her face to bear a curious expression of suddenness and flutter, but I know that I had seen Macbeth at the theatre a night or two before, and that her face looked to me as if it were all disturbed by fiery air, like the faces I had seen rise out of the witch's cauldron. Okay, so maybe it means like her face is really flushed. Like she's really stressed or embarrassed at the moment, and her face is just really flushed. Maybe that's what that means. The woman reminds Pip, and therefore also us, of the witches from Macbeth, and all that this implies, imagining her face above a cauldron. Through Pip, his narrator, Dickens is alluding here to a vision Pip will have of the housekeeper by a fire later in the narrative. Alright, that's chapters 25 and 26. Exercise. Dinner interactions. What literary work does Dickens refer to using allusion, Macbeth? Which of his characters is he describing? The servant. What does his tell us about this character? That she's got a terrible time of it. She's stressed all the time. How does Jaggers treat this character? Be sure to include evidence from the text. He treats her like garbage. Okay, 3 chapters in a row. 27, 28, 29. Biddy, Pip's old friend from Kent. Biddy writes Pip a letter telling him that Joe and Mr. Wopsle will visit him in London. Pip is immediately mortified and worries that Joe will embarrass him. Joe will come to the apartment that Pip has now decorated lavishly, artificially boosting his social class with meaningless status symbols. Pip has recently also hired a servant, the Avenger, who, which one, Thor? Hulk? Nah, Hulk wouldn't be a servant. Man, I'm funny. Has recently hired a servant, the Avenger, whom he dresses in a smart uniform. He has little use for him and despises him. When Joe arrives, both men are uncomfortable. Pip is upset by Joe's lack of manners and discomfort, while Joe is uncomfortable with Pip's snobbishness and snooty surroundings. This demonstrates the gap between the working class and upper class. Joe tells Pip that Mr. Wopsle has left the church to become an actor. When he then tells Pip that he is there to deliver a message about Estella. She is coming back to Miss Havisham soon, and Pip should visit her there. Joe apologizes for coming, recognizing that they're now at different stations and that his place is at the forge. Joe shows more integrity than Pip and is uncomfortable only because of Pip's new social awareness, not because Joe wants to rise among social classes. Pip chases after Joe, won over by his dignity, but doesn't catch him in time. Dickens uses Joe's language to indicate his lower class. Phrases such as, "Pip, how air you, Pip?" and commenting that pictures of London are drawed to architectural. He is trying to fit in by using gentleman's English, but is garbled. He doesn't fit in this world. Literary devices. Dickens uses another simile in this chapter to set the mood. Unfortunately, the morning was drizzly, and an angel could not have concealed the fact that Bernard was shedding sooty tears outside the window, like some weak giant of a sweep. Then, employing his literary technique again, Dickens shows us how Joe fumbles with his hat, taking it up carefully with both hands, like a bird's nest with eggs in it. This chapter continues to show the divide between the classes. Now we understand how Pip's expectations have changed his view of Joe. As the time approached, I should have liked to run away, but the Avenger pursuant to orders was in the hall, and presently I heard Joe on the staircase. I knew it was Joe by his clumsy manner of coming upstairs, his state boots being always too big for him, and by the time it took him to read the names on the other floors in the course of his accent. Oh, Joe has to read out loud, so he's reading out loud the names on the floors, and Pip can hear him. When at last he stopped outside our door, I could hear his finger tracing over the painted letters of my name, and I afterwards distinctly heard him breathing in at the keyhole. Finally, he gave a faint, single rap, and Pepper, such was the compromising name of the avenging boy, announced, "Mr. Gargery." I thought he never would have done wiping his feet, and that I must have gone out to lift him off the mat, but at last he came in. Joe, as lucidly as possible, sums up the idea of the differences in classes when he states, "Divisions among such must come, and must be met as they come." Pip's snobbishness doesn't last, since he has the good sense to realize that he had neither the good sense nor the good feeling to know that this was all his fault, and that if he had been easier with Joe, Joe would have been easier with him. Pip then states, "I felt impatient of him, and out of temper with him, in which condition he heaped coals of fire on my head. So, what are they saying? They're saying Joe visits him, and it's awkward. It's super awkward, and it's Pip's fault. And at the end of the meeting, Pip realizes it's his fault, and he feels embarrassed, and he tries to go make it up to Joe, but Joe's already gone. Okay. Chapter 28. I believe we're nearing the end of the story. Okay, Chapter 28. Pip regrets his interaction with Joe and feels guilt. He plans to stay at Joe's home when he visits Miss Havisham, yet he convinces himself that that won't work for a variety of reasons. He decides to stay at the Blue Boar. The adult Pip, narrating, calls his younger self a self-swindler. This swindler is, like a trickster, somebody who tricks people into believing something that isn't true. So if he's a self-swindler, that means he's convincing himself of something that's not true. Okay, the adult Pip, narrating, calls his younger self a self-swindler, disloyal and without personal integrity. He is stealing from himself his relationships with Biddy and Joe. Traveling with him on the coach are two convicts, and Pip recognizes one of them as the man who gave him the shilling. Pip overhears him telling the story of a convict who told him to find the boy who fed him and kept his secret, and give him 2 one-pound notes, confirming Pip's suspicion that his convict sent the man. When Pip arrives at the Blue Boar, he reads an article that describes Pumblechook as the founder of Pip's fortunes. So people in the town still care about Pip and are writing articles in the paper about him having good expectations, but they think his uncle Pumblechook is the one who did it. Dickens shows us how badly Pip feels about how he treated Joe with this extended metaphor of swindlers and money. All other swindlers upon earth are nothing to the self-swindlers, and with such pretenses did I cheat myself. Surely a curious thing, that I should innocently take a bad half-crown of somebody else's manufacture is reasonable enough, but that I should knowingly reckon the spurious coin of my own sake, and good money, an obliging stranger, under pretense of compactly folding up my banknotes for security's sake, abstracts the notes and gives me nutshells. But what is his sleight of hand to mine when I fold up my own nutshells and pass them on myself as notes? So yeah, somebody might try a little quick fingers to steal money off of me, but what is that to me when I'm tricking myself? Dickens also uses similes in this chapter. Pip describes the prisoner's guard as one looking on at the putting to of the horses. Rather with an air as if the convicts were an interesting exhibition, not formally open at the moment, and he the curator. Prisoner's guard is looking on, putting to of horses rather than the airs of a convict. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe that instead of he's looking around like, hey, look at me, look, I got convicts, look at these convicts I've got. That makes me important. Pip goes even further to describe these two prisoners with back-to-back similes. The great numbers on their backs, as if they were street doors, their coarse, mangy, ungainly outer surfaces, as if they were lower animals. In the end, these two prisoners aren't just two prisoners, but exhibitions, street doors, and lower animals, all rolled up into two. Chapter 29. Pip daydreams about restoring Satis House to its splendor and marrying Estella, realizing that he loves her against hope and likely his own happiness. He goes to Miss Havisham's and is surprised to see Orlick there, tasked as a gatekeeper protecting the house. Estella has transformed into a stunningly beautiful woman. Pip and Estella walk in the garden, where Estella notices Pip has also improved himself and has necessarily cut off the company of his lower-class family and friends. For her, this is a necessary loss to raise his social status. They talk of old memories, and Pip is hurt that Estella doesn't remember making him cry. She relates that she has no heart. I have no softness there, no sympathy, sentiment, nonsense. Relating sympathy with nonsense shows that she doesn't value love, but Pip says that he doesn't believe her. Miss Havisham tells Pip to love her, even if Estella hurts him. She wants Pip to suffer from his love, as she has suffered from her own all these years. When the focused professional Jaggers comes for dinner, he doesn't notice Estella's beauty. Jaggers' oversight bothers Pip. Pip is grateful for what he believes is Miss Havisham's patronage, as well as her instructions to love Estella. The reader can understand that Pip is delusional towards Miss Havisham, who has no indication of kindness towards Pip in thought or action. Pip, the adult, narrates with shame that he didn't think twice about not visiting Joe, knowing that Estella wouldn't have approved. literary devices. Dickens continues hammering away at this theme of the differences among the classes as Pip loiters into the country on Miss Havisham's side of town, which was not Joe's side. Reinforcing the same theme later in this chapter, Stella tells Pip, "Since your change of fortune and prospects, you have changed your companions." Pip agrees, and Stella responds with, "What was fit company for you once would be quite unfit company for you now." Congratulations, you've forgotten everyone who used to love you. They probably still love you, but they don't matter anymore. That's pretty messed up. Dickens also takes advantage of strong imagery and similes. Pip thinks that Miss Havisham has reserved it to him for him to restore the desolate house, admit the sunshine into the dark room, set the clocks a-going and the cold hearths a-blazing, tear down the cobwebs, destroy the vermin, in short, do all the shining deeds of the young knight of romance, and marry the princess. Pip thinks that's all that Miss Havisham just wants to make him miserable. Because her ex-fiance made her miserable, so she's trying to make anybody she can miserable. With this strong imagery, Dickens also places Pip as the classic young prince hero. "I had stopped to look at the house as I passed, and its seared red brick walls, blocked windows, and strong green ivy clasping even the stacks of chimneys with its twigs and tendons, as if with sinewy old arms, had made up a rich, attractive mystery, of which I was the hero." The rich, attractive mystery is the house. The house makes up a rich, attractive mystery. Pip says, "Once for all, I knew to my sorrow, often and often, if not always, that I loved her, against reason, against promise, against peace, against hope, against happiness, against all discouragement that could be." This is another example of polysyndeton, right? Because against. As you'll recall, that's repeating a word. Dickens squeezes in another simile in this chapter. The whole had a slovenly, confined, and sleepy look, like a cage for a human dormouse, while he, looming dark and heavy in the shadow of a corner by the window, looked like the human dormouse for whom it was fitted up, as indeed he was. Okay. Exercise, higher class living. Read the following passage and answer the questions. Estella was the inspiration of it, and the heart of it, of course. But, though she had taken such strong possession of me, though my fancy and my hope were so set upon her, though her influence on my boyish life and character had been all-powerful, I did not, even that romantic morning, invest her with any attributes save those she possessed. Meaning, I didn't make up stuff in my head and make her more than she was. I just took her for what she was. She was beautiful and ruthless and unkind. I mention this in this place of a fixed purpose because it is the clue by which I am to be followed into my poor labyrinth. According to my experience, the conventional notion of a lover cannot always be true. The unqualified truth is that, when I loved Estella with the love of a man, I loved her simply because I found her irresistible. Once for all, I knew to my sorrow, often and often, if not always, that I loved her against reason, against promise, against peace, against hope, against happiness, against all discouragement that could be. Once and for all, I loved her none the less because I knew it, and it had no more influence in restraining me than if I had devoutly believed her to be human perfection. So he doesn't think of her as being perfect, but basically she was his first love, and so she sort of takes over his brain, his heart, his soul. He's just irrevocably in love with her, even though he knows he probably shouldn't be. Okay, let's look at some flashcards. Ooh, Beguile. Beguile is... Oh, I don't know how to define it. Oh, wrong button. To lead by deception. Deceive. To deceive is beguile. Complacent. Resting back on your laurels. self-satisfied, contrivance, plan, artificial arrangement or development, entreat, beg, make an earnest request or plead, obtuse, uh, difficult, being difficult, lacking sharpness or quickness or sensibility of intellect. Okay, they're just using it as stupid, trifle, small and meaningless. Exposition, that is the author telling things, it's hard to say, setting forth the meaning or purpose, as in writing, telling you what you need to know to understand what's happening. Lucid, clearly understood. A lucid fact is a clearly understood fact. Pettish, I don't know, is it like petty? Fretful and peevish. Fretful. So like nervous? Nervous. Choleric. Easily moved to often unreasonable or excessive anger, hot-tempered. Ungainly. Oh, uncoordinated. Lacking in smoothness or dexterity, clumsy. Pernicious. Evil. Highly damaging or destructive. Labyrinth. That's a maze. A place constructed or filled with intricate passageways and blind alley. A maze. Jargon. Language specific to a field. Sinewy. Tough and muscle bound. Okay. That'll do it for this one, and I'll meet you in the next one.